What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, last month, the PlayStation VR2 released, and while Sony hasn't exactly been jumping at the chance to talk about sales figures for this headset, one report that's now circulating has an analyst actually pointing to disaster that Sony is going to try to avoid with this headset. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Nintendo's fabled next-generation platform, the Switch 2, and how one piece of information got people online really excited and then immediately disappointed after there was a very strange twist with the whole thing. And we'll also be talking about the Wii U, a lot of concerns around the flash memory inside of the system going bad, as now it looks like we may have a solution. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with an update and correction for a story yesterday that had to do with Xbox and a controller with a screen on it, as a patent was circulating, looking like Microsoft was working on a new controller that would use an LCD panel of some kind to go through social media feeds and update things that are happening in the game right in front of you. Well, we can actually see this posted up by Tom Warren, who says the patent filing is actually from Turtle Beach, but it's still interesting that third parties are continuing to experiment with screens on Xbox controllers. So it's not necessarily from the platform holder Microsoft who'd be working to R&D this thing, from a third-party developer or manufacturer working to make themselves different from the competition, this time though being Turtle Beach. They'd still license with Microsoft, so they'd be aware of everything going on. It's just a cool conversation to have of what could be next for our input into games and how can that continue to evolve. Could we go back to a screen and a controller? I guess anything's possible. Also, we had previously discussed Bill leaking out that there was a Diablo 4 bundle or system of some kind for the Xbox, and it turns out there are a lot of expectations that Microsoft would, partnered with Activision Blizzard, would do something a bit more than just putting the game in the box for you, and unfortunately it looks like they just put the game in the box. Well, we can see this over on news.xbox.com, where they show off the bundle, and yeah, it's just the Xbox. I guess the box itself, there you go. It has some Diablo 4 representation. It's coming out June 6th at the price of $560. It's going to have a mount and some extra armor along with Diablo 4 itself. So it's kind of it. It's just the Xbox with the game in there and a couple of extra perks and benefits. Unfortunate that it's not a new paint job, as was kind of alluded to in that original leak from the retail database. So at this time, it's still just Halo that has the limited edition or special edition paint job for the Xbox Series, and maybe you can look towards something like Starfield. I'm trying to figure out what the next big release for Microsoft will be, where they actually go back to the drawing board and work up a paint job for the system. Maybe it's Forza, maybe it's Starfield. I guess we'll wait and see. Oh, and we did talk about PlayStation Plus games for the month of April, and figure we should also talk about the Xbox Live Games with Gold offering for April, and we've gone over this basically every month. Hasn't really gotten any better, and somehow it's actually gotten worse, and I don't, is this worse? Take a look. You can see this again over on news.xbox.com. Let's see, we have Out of Space Couch Edition. It's available April 1st to the 30th. Peaky Blinders Mastermind. It's available April 16th to May 15th. And that's kind of it. They try to put it over by saying it's $34.98 in value and 2,000 points in gamer score. I mean, Microsoft's been doing that for a while, where they try to say, hey, look how many points you get for your gamer score. And once again, it just feels like this is a massive afterthought for Microsoft, and I kind of feel like they're just going to get rid of Xbox Live Gold when Game Pass takes over anyway. And again, there is precedent they can set, as back in the day, they were the ones that showed up charging for online. Could you imagine if Microsoft turned around and said, no, now it's free to play online, and of course we have Game Pass that gives you a bunch of value? That, I think, would be big for the gaming industry, especially on the console side, and I would like to see them do that, but for now, that's your Xbox Live Games with Gold games for April. You may as well claim them. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony and kind of a rough week that they've had. We talked about the Last of Us Part 1 situation with the port job to PC just not being very good. And by the way, turns out Naughty Dog had quite a bit of involvement with that port, and Iron Galaxy was mostly supporting them. So That's a whole conversation once again on its own, but now we can turn our attention to a report around PlayStation VR2. This, of course, launching just over a month ago at the end of February, and we have some numbers we can take a look at here. This posted up by Takashi Machizuki over on Bloomberg, which, by the way, Takashi Machizuki has had a lot of his reporting refuted by these companies. However, he keeps coming back with information that seems to be backing his claims. And the big thing that he was going over with Sony at the time was that their expectations were lowered around PlayStation VR2 or their internal targets and manufacturing. Sony's saying, no, it's not correct at all. But it was more word choice and stuff, kind of arguing semantics there. Basically, the idea is Sony realized, okay, the PSVR2 is probably not going to sell as well as the original target that we set, but we can see this posted up again by Takashi saying Sony's PSVR2 is not doing well. This is pretty straightforward. IDCs, we have the person there, expect sales of just 270,000 units by the end of March. In fact, going on to say this analyst mentions a price cut for the PSVR to avoid a complete disaster. Now, I'm linking to two sources down below, one being Bloomberg, but I understand Bloomberg has the whole paywall thing going on, so I'm also linking to PlayStation Lifestyle, has many of these quotes that we'll take a look at here from IDC's Vice President of Data and Analytics, Francisco. They say consumers around the world are facing rising costs of living, rising interest rates, and increasing layoffs. VR headsets are not top of mind for most consumers under the current economic climate. And their conclusion is that for Sony to avoid a complete disaster when it comes to sales, that they would have to do a price cut of some kind for the PSVR 2. Now, they mention that consumers, VR isn't on their mind with the current economic climate, but really, think about VR and then gaming in general. So you kind of assume if you're cutting back overall in your life, you're probably cutting back on things like entertainment that then goes to gaming. VR is already viewed by, I would say, the vast majority of gamers as being a novelty thing that's not even necessary for just gaming, which in itself, sure, not necessary to have if you're going through tough times economically here, right? So VR being a niche thing, and now you see Sony pushing this headset hard at first, but I haven't really seen them talk much about it, and I haven't really seen any big-time reveals for the PlayStation VR2 from Sony. Now, we believe they're going to have a showcase here in a couple of months, probably in May at some point, preceding what was going to be E3, well, preceding Summer Game Fest, how about that one? And maybe that's where they show off a big PlayStation VR2 title that would go under the category of must-have, because I'm not necessarily seeing it yet. Look, Horizon Call of the Mountain, it's an interesting VR game, but I don't know if I would tell someone, hey, you gotta spend $600 because it was part of the bundle. You gotta pay that much money and maybe buy a PS5 as well, so $1,100 to experience this game. Maybe you go over to a friend's house and try it out, and that's enough to wow you, and then you're like, well, someday. I think Gran Turismo 7, for a lot of people, probably still the big aha moment for VR, but then to get that full effect, you feel like you want the wheel and the shifter and the pedals, and once again, in this kind of economic climate that's being pointed out by the analyst, doesn't really fit in well. I do also want to point out that these appear to be estimates from the analyst and kind of their conclusion that a price cut would at least help. We will find out more information straight from Sony during their financial briefing that they should have. I think it's going to be in the first 10 days of May. So again, in about a month and a half or so, we'll know from them, Sony, how PSVR 2 has done since launch, because you feel like you release a device like that also plays into the metaverse field. Investors will be very curious how many you sold, and are you excited about its current performance? Are you down on it a bit? What's the deal here? So that we can wait for exact numbers most likely, or at least a feeling from Sony, their future projection, because my one concern is that PSVR 2 falls on its face over its first year, and then Sony just moves on. Treat it kind of like the Vita, and just don't really take it seriously and continue to shift focus just to the PlayStation 5. Of course, that being as someone who was an early adopter of the PSVR 2. So I guess we'll see as we go along here, but at least according to analysts now and Bloomberg, not going well out of the gate for the PSVR2. Next up, let's talk about that fabled Nintendo Switch 2, or the next generation platform from Nintendo, still technically not guaranteed to be a play off of the current Switch. This has to do with information that was really starting to circulate rapidly through the news cycle, only to find out that people are kind of playing a prank on the original source. Let's take a look here. This is the tweet that was mentioned from Connor. According to my source, next gen of the Nintendo Switch dev kit have been just sent to developers. Now, Connor had a tweet a little while ago that we had talked about where it appeared they got information that Samsung was going to be producing the chip alongside of NVIDIA for Nintendo as 5 nanometers, the whole thing. And then hours later, maybe, they came back to Twitter to be like, oh no, that's not correct. So again, that traveled very quickly, and then a lot of retractions. We had to backtrack on a lot of that stuff. But in this case, they're saying that dev kits have been sent out to developers, which of course got people excited because, oh, does that mean that we could be on track for this next generation system coming out at the end of this year, or maybe even first half of 2024? You feel like dev kits would go out a year or so ahead of time just to make sure developers are at least on the same page and have a fighting chance to have their stuff ready to go at launch or launch window. Well, here's kind of the issue with this, as over on Fanboards, Nate did point this out as he started to realize that people around him were talking about the idea of feeding them false information to see if they would essentially bite. And we can see, for example, Nate here, where he said, are you implying someone fed that Twitter account fake information to see if they would tweet it? And people are saying, yeah, that's exactly what we did. So again, it just seems like people having some fun trolling a bit, but this information legitimately got picked up in the news cycle and was making the rounds that dev kits are out there. Things are moving in the background. And look, Nintendo, there's a whole story that Nintendo was going to do a Switch Pro and they decided to pull dev kits back. And this is something that Digital Foundry talked about. And I do think that Nintendo learned a bit even from that situation because dev kits in general, when they supposedly went out, it seemed like people knew. And then when they went back, once again, people knew. So I kind of think that whenever dev kits go out, which they might already be out there, Nintendo's be a bit more stringent with NDAs and making sure people don't necessarily just start talking about this new Nintendo dev kit they just got, just to keep things under wrap for that eventual big reveal. So yeah, unfortunately, the information that was going around recently about dev kits for a next generation Switch, turns out someone was just playing a prank on them. Next up, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts. These, of course, cover the sales in Japan physically week to week. And this was an interesting one because it does show Resident Evil 4 on the charts. And the split is a little surprising, I think, for a lot of people. Let's take a look here at the top 10 for games, and we can see Resident Evil 4 indeed at the top, 89,662. That is the PS5 version. But look right below it, the PS4 version, 85,371, almost an even 50-50 split between the next generation, or the current generation now, PlayStation, the last generation system. So Capcom actually looking pretty smart to do that PS4 version. Then we have Atelier Ryza 3, that's on the Switch, 31,140. Kirby still hanging in there at number 4 spot. Then Atelier Ryza 3 on the PS4, 17,240. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Then Atelier Ryza 3, once again, this on the PS5, 14,787. So you do see the PS4 version actually outselling the PS5 version. Splatoon 3, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and then Minecraft on the Switch. Moving over to the hardware, the Switch at the top still, 54,653. Should reclaim that top spot second week in a row now. PS5, 38,964. Gotta admit, I figured Resident Evil 4 would have a bit more of an effect on PlayStation 5 hardware sales, specifically more of a bump to it, but actually fell a couple of units there. The PS4, 1,531, the Xbox Series, 583, and the 3DS, doesn't matter if the eShop's shutting down. Nope, we're still moving 84 of these things. Now, we already know how Resident Evil 4 has performed with 3 million copies in the first 2 days, but I thought it was more interesting to see the split between the PS5 and the PS4 here in Japan, and it does make you wonder, really across the world, what that split is like for the PS5 versus the PS4. And it also kind of makes sense why you see Sony wanting to do so much cross-gen stuff, even going into now 2023. So hey, Capcom continues to roll along here with Resident Evil 4 doing very well. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Wii U. There's been a lot of concern around this system's longevity with eMMC flash memory inside of the device seemingly failing. Not at a massive clip necessarily, but consider the fact that there's not that many Wii U's out there to begin with, and the fact that you need the tablet and the system combined for it to all work correctly, then, well, you start to run into issues when it comes to the supply. So failing eMMC memory, not exactly helping the situation. Well, Voltar has been on the scene here trying to work this out, and I gotta say, he's presented something that I think can really work to fix or at least alleviate most of the situation here, which we can see this posted up over on Twitter, where he says, I've designed a Wii U NAND interposer that will allow you to both dump right to your busted Wii U NAND as well as replace any bad NANDs with a micro SD card. I'll revise the routing a little more, but this is done. I'll spin these up and make sure everything fits, then I'll release the files for free for everyone. This is really cool, and this is sort of what I was talking about when we saw, there was a post that it is possible to replace the eMMC flash memory with an SD card, but it was just a jumble of wires, you're cutting traces left and right. It wasn't the most straightforward, neat-looking thing in a system. The idea of having a ribbon cable, or in this case, a board that you sit down, you solder some of the points, and you have an SD card that you can use in its place, I think it's a great idea and would be a great way to revive some of these Wii U's that we're hearing about failing over time with this memory. We're still trying to figure out, is it a bad batch of chips? Is there something going on with the system that's making these chips fail? But the idea of being able to replace with an SD card, some have wondered, would it actually work? Can you replace? Well, technically yes, and SD cards have gotten so fast now that it should be mostly a negligible difference in terms of speed, especially if it's one in the last couple of years at this point. And it's really cool that Voltar is releasing these for free, because all you'd have to do then is go on to one of these sites that allows you to fabricate boards from schematics that you upload, and they'll ship them to your door like a week later or something. So, hey, good stuff here. Hopefully this works out well. He's going to do some testing, and then people can try to revive some of those Wii U's that aren't necessarily just all software, but we have hardware issues with those chips. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you don't have a PSVR2, what would be the thing that could get you interested in one? 31% say a decent price cut. 34% though say nothing, I'm just not interested in VR as it is currently, and that's just how it's going to be. There are some people who just don't really care about VR. 10% say a must-have new exclusive game. 13% say PC support, and then 12% say I still need a PS5 in the first place. So for them, it's like a $1,050 overall purchase to get everything involved there. So I think a price cut would first and foremost help, obviously. And that's the thing though, how low can they really take this headset? Because in the world of higher end VR headsets, it's already priced well. And I don't know if going down to $499 is going to be that big moment where you go, well, I got to go get it. $399, but then can Sony actually produce these at large enough scale where they're losing money like that on it? Probably not. So it is this situation where if Sony wants this to work, they're just gonna have to grit and bear it and just get through it and continue to support it with games. And that's the only part I'm concerned about. Will they continue to support it with games if it looks like it's just not selling like they were hoping it would in the first place? That's something we'll have to wait and see. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Kamer, says, happy to see Capcom doing so absurdly well in 2022 and 2023. Welcome back, sweet boy. Yeah, it's a really good turnaround story for a company like Capcom, because believe it or not, before Monster Hunter World, there were talks and rumors that they were almost purchased by Microsoft, and what a world that would be in 2023 now. But Monster Hunter World, that release was massive for them, turned things around, and it kind of put them on course with their other releases. I mean, obviously Monster Hunter Rise just continued things, but then they looked at Resident Evil and they really got moving with the remake series. RE Engine went to the next level, and well, the rest is history now with Resident Evil 4 Remake being their latest successful release. So the future is definitely bright for Capcom, and that's great to see. Also, speaking of the RE engine, could we try using that engine to make a 2D Mega Man X9? Hey, after seeing what they were able to do with Ghosts and Goblins, which by the way, does run on RE engine, I wouldn't mind seeing what it would look like. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whereas the PSVR2 reportedly struggling out of the gate. What would you do if you were Sony to turn things around and get things moving with the headset? And then also, what about the Switch 2 situation where the information was actually fed to them and people were kind of playing a prank? Do you expect more of that going towards the end of the year when hopefully Nintendo is ready to talk about it? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.